The month of March zoomed by in the capital region in a flurry of much-welcomed mild weather days, new coronavirus vaccination clinics, and major breaking news. Coming up on this episode of The Eagle, we'll go over the week's top headlines.
The governor's administration says, hey, we were doing our best with anybody who needed help.
We'll hear about a heightened wave of social justice activism in the capital region that follows the violent shootings in Atlanta this month and escalating anti-Asian xenophobia around the country.
We do trace a lot of the large spike in hate crimes to the pandemic.
And Kristi Gustafson Barlette talks to the Fabulous Beekman Boys about life, love, and baby goats.
We wanted to get kindness out in the world in the biggest way we could.
This is The Eagle, a Times Union podcast, a look inside our newsroom. I'm Jessica Marshall.
If you're enjoying this podcast, take advantage of all the Times Union has to offer and support our efforts to bring you award-winning journalism by becoming a Times Union member today. Go to timesunion.com/subscribe.
Welcome to The Eagle. I'm Jessica Marshall. Okay, let's join Times Union editor Casey Seiler for a look at what appeared this week in the Times Union and on timesunion.com. All right, Casey, we're here once again. We're going to go over the top headlines. Let's start with Governor Andrew Cuomo. The troubles continue for him. What's the latest there? What happened this week?
Yes, a new scandal emerged, first reported by the Times Union's Brendan Lyons on Wednesday evening, that in the early days of the pandemic, there was apparently a program in place in which high-level officials at the State Department of Health were dispatched to do prioritized testing of Governor Cuomo's relatives, including his mother, his brother Chris Cuomo, who of course is a CNN anchor, and top associates. It appears that these fairly high-level officials at DOH, who might actually have had other things to do since a pandemic was breaking out, were instead assigned by Howard Zucker, the health commissioner, to go and perform coronavirus tests on these individuals. Those tests were then, or the samples were then brought back to the Wadsworth Labs here in Albany, the health department's, sort of research center, where those tests were given priority. The governor's administration says, hey, we were doing our best with anybody who needed help, including, high-level officials, people in the media, you name it. But it is now one of the 4 topics that will be considered by the state assembly's impeachment inquiry. And it's another very bad day for the governor.
That's a big story, and that's getting picked up all over the place. The Times Union is getting a lot of credit for that. And you can read more about it at our CapCon blog at timesunion.com. All right. So vaccinations, on the topic of COVID, vaccinations are picking up the pace. What's the latest there? What's the new requirements?
Well, the governor announced early this week that folks in their 50s, and Jess, you may not believe it by looking at me, but I am in fact in that category, are now eligible for vaccines. And I, quick like a bunny, was able to get several, of course, canceling them as I got earlier and earlier and earlier ones, and put myself on a wait list with my GP on Tuesday. On Wednesday, they called me up and said, hey, we've got to come in tomorrow. And as we sit here, I'm about an hour and a half after I got my first shot of the Moderna vaccine, and I'm happy to say I don't appear to be in anaphylactic shock.
That is good news all around, I think. For more on how you can get the vaccine, we've got a pretty extensive piece on timesunion.com right now. So if anyone has any questions about that. All right, moving on. Some NXIVM news also came down this week. We always get excited when we hear that. Can you tell us what happened there?
Rob Gavin reported that federal prosecutors down in Brooklyn, who of course were the ones who brought charges against Keith Raniere, the leader of NXIVM, the man known as Vanguard, and his associates, prosecutors were rather upset that one of the defense lawyers or the defense team for Keith Raniere put into the court record a document that included the names of scores of alleged victims of Raniere. This was the defense's response to a restitution request that the prosecution had put in. The defense team said, whoopsie daisy, just a simple mistake. We worked to cure it, to use the legal term, as quickly as possible. But federal prosecutors said that this is not the first time that the defense team has let out materials revealing the names and personal information about alleged victims of Keith Raniere and NXIVM. And they said that if it happens again, there should be sanctions for any officers of the court who are involved.
If you're interested in more NXIVM news, check out our sister podcast, NXIVM on Trial. So in national news, on the national level, one of President Biden's priorities that he stated this year was that he wanted to push Congress to approve billions of dollars for bolstering computer chip manufacturing in the United States. Now, if that happens, does that mean we could see another chip fab up in Malta?
That is very much what the folks up in Malta are hoping. What they are counting on or anticipating is that windfall of federal funding through what is known as the CHIPS Act could be the final goad for what they're referring to as Fab 8.2 up at Malta. Tom Caulfield, who is a top executive up there, calls it not a question of if, it's a question of when. And he points to that potential federal funding as really the catalyst, the change maker.
All right. Well, our business editors will probably be staying very closely attuned to that. Some news this week of the unusual variety that we get every once in a while. There was an attempted explosion at an Adirondack camp. Can you tell us what happened there?
Or so it appears. Yeah, a 40-year-old man named Irving Talavera was arrested last weekend after troopers said they were investigating what they're calling his plot to use kind of Rube Goldberg style explosive device mixing propane and fireworks to blow up a Hamilton County, Adirondack camp that was, once again, according to troopers, supposed to blow up, to ignite, and then detonate when the camp's owners opened the door. It sparked, but it failed, thank goodness, to detonate the propane that had built up inside of the structure. So a very bizarre story. Nothing so far on potential motive, according to the state police, but we'll be following that going forward.
Indeed. Very thankful that no one was injured there. The last bit of news that I want to cover today is a bit exciting on a recreational front. Regal Cinemas is planning to reopen next week. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, Regal, like many of the big chains, have been, like so many businesses, badly battered by the pandemic. They were open towards the end of the summer and then into the fall, and where I, of course, saw the one movie in a theater that I have seen over the course of the last year, Tenet, if you're wondering. And by the way, it was so confusing that it completely pushed any fears of infection out of my brain while I was sitting there. But then again, there were only 4 other people in the theater.
Well, that's Regal, strangely comforting.
Indeed, in a weird way. Thank you, Christopher Nolan. But Regal then shut down as the surge got worse. They, in New York at least, put the blame on Governor Cuomo and said it was going to be impossible to meet the state's regs and stay in business. But it's spring. Thank goodness, infection rates are down. And the governor has given the all clear to theaters to reopen again, of course, with reduced capacity limits.
Now, another little ray of hope in the Capital Region theater scene, Capital Repertory Theater, just debuted its brand new space. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Steve Barnes got a tour along with Paul Bukowski, our photographer, of Cap Reps, now just known as The Rep, their new home, which is in a former electrical warehouse in Nabisco Bakery on North Pearl Street, just a couple of blocks north of the Palace Theater. It is a gorgeous space inside. It has state-of-the-art, lighting, and it's just an amazing building. I cannot wait to go see a show there. If you ever saw a show at the Rep's old digs, it was a little bit pokey. I think it's fair to say. It had all the charm of a high school gym, but of course they put on great theater. But this is really the space that a company as talented as this deserves. Still uncertain, of course, when it's going to be able to open, but we are hopeful that perhaps the summer could bring the return of great theater from that company.
Indeed, live theater is one of the things that I have missed most in the past year, so that is really excellent to hear. All right, Casey, thank you so much. We'll check back in with you next week.
Good talking to you.
Activism in the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities throughout the United States has gained a new sense of urgency in the wake of deadly shootings at 2 Atlanta area spas. Jinah Kim, owner of Sunny's Farm and Kitchen in Troy, helped organize a rally to denounce systemic racism and to stop Asian hate here in Albany earlier this week that drew more than 300 people.
Thank you.
Reporter Pete DeMola spoke with her afterward to discuss the new wave of activism that's emerging and what comes next.
Let's start off by talking about what is going on right now, precisely at this point in time with the AAPI community here in the United States. We did have a mass tragedy last week, but xenophobia and racism has been going on for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of the presence and activism of Asian Americans across the states, I would say that it's been there for since the first wave of immigrants came. But when it came to political activity and involvement, it definitely took generations to cultivate, both for cultural reasons, lingual barriers, and whatnot. And I think in larger cities, we have seen mass movements and mobilization of AAPI communities, whereas in the capital region, even one of the organizations that helped sponsor the rally, AAPI, I believe their branch in the capital region. It was originally headquartered in LA, but the branch here only started in 2016. So I would say that it is relatively a new wave for us in upstate, like the capital region of New York. But at the same time, there's increasing numbers of Asian Americans coming from all different types of communities, all different ethnic backgrounds, generations, and types of persons. And when it came to the recent tragedy, that definitely sparked something that was existing. But we do trace a lot of the large spike in hate crimes to the pandemic and the start of the rhetoric behind the pandemic and its origins. And that's when we saw more targeting and specific violent acts against Asian Americans.
Is what happened in Atlanta, is this kind of like a turning point now with activism in the AAPI community?
I guess time will tell. It's too, I think, soon to really know kind of how things will progress. But our hopes are that the activism will continue. I would argue that there have been efforts even in the past, even if it is not specifically in our community here. And I do think the Black Lives Matter movement really laid the groundwork for us to have that platform to join in and speak further on this collective marginalization of our communities. So I think there's a lot of factors that played into the fact to the fact that more people are willing to speak out, including the national uproar and us as a region feeling that same burden to move forward. And I think just in general, like as you see the rising of newer generations, and especially women voices in our area. That's been surely, I think, shifting the conversation and culture. Our parents come from just such a different generation where, and I mentioned this at the rally too, but they were told just to keep their head down, work hard, don't agitate, don't get political, do your best to survive. So it's not like they didn't experience they actually experienced the brunt of discrimination, a lot worse than I think I would have ever experienced. But at the same time, they never voiced it because they just thought it was a part of life and a part of having to live here in the United States. Whereas for Asian Americans, a lot of us were born here. We literally grew up here. This, America is all we know, and kind of the communities that we've always wanted to belong to, but we were told we're not, just because of the way we look. And so I think a lot of that, the culmination of those feelings of ostracization and being othered, starting as a child. It's one thing when you're an adult and you kind of understand where people are coming from, and even then it's not right. But as children, I think it's especially scarring and especially difficult to comprehend why our faces is what dictates how we're treated.
My name is Van Tran Nguyen. I'm an immigrant. I have a multi-hyphenated identity. I am Vietnamese, Chinese, Sri Lankan, American. And it seems to me that the more hyphens you carry in your identity as an American is actually more of an opportunity to be heartbroken by America.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the emerging voices? I mean, some of the speakers at the rally were very powerful.
Each person was just a community member. None of them came representing a specific group or an organization. I think each person was very much compelled to speak up, even if they didn't like public speaking, and even though it took a lot of courage and it wasn't something that they were used to.
You're not white enough to be included in positions of power and decision-making seats, and just American enough to be used as a token minority group for justification that racism doesn't exist in America.
They responded to our call of action, just saying, hey, what is it that I can do? What is it that I can say and contribute to? Not all of them even asked to speak. It was more of as during the progress of learning about their stories and more of where their heart was, that when I did, ask them hey, would you be willing to share your story? And it was scary, but a lot of them did say, said yes, I think I have to. Everyone's just plugged into different types of groups, different support systems in the community, areas, locations. So I think that really brought power, because it wasn't just a single narrow-minded perspective, but really an overarching and a collective focused message that we got from different types of people.
So after the rally, some of my contacts in the Chinese community reached out to me, who are really excited to keep the momentum going. Again, with the Chinese Community Center where I take classes, they really want to keep the dialogue going, keep the momentum going, ensure that this is not a one-off thing where everyone expresses solidarity for a few days of tragedy and heartbreak and they go on to their lives. But these issues are very real. What comes next?
And of course, I'm just a small representation, and I actually speak here as an individual,
Sure.
From Troy and as a small business owner. But I think there's a couple things that need to happen and that will happen. The first thing is there needs to be solidarity and unity, even within the Asian American community. And we saw that so clearly on Monday, between generations, from grandparents to grandchildren, all age ranges. And that's what I think is what's truly unique and advantageous for our community here. And I think we want to pull on all of those different perspectives, however that looks, but I think that's going to mean constant struggles. We grew up with our parents having language barriers and not even being able to talk to our own parents in the same language. Generational cultural barriers, a lot of things, even differences on our views on gender and sexuality. Those are things that we have to struggle through as a collective community. And then I think secondly, partnering and really finding collaborations with other communities of color, especially our Black and Brown brothers and sisters. So that's going to be another step in that. And then I'm hoping that with that kind of collectivization and broad networks, that we can start delegating and really not have like some sort of central team, but like a team that is a coalition that includes all sorts of people within the AAPI community, so that we can branch off and people have their own events and of own topics of discussion, and panels and rallies. Like I don't think there should just be one organizer, like any other successful movement. So I think being able to identify those key players and working together, and again, like addressing the deeper root issues at stake here, the biases that have played into something as violent as the shootings last week. So I think those are things that we are trying to discuss. We're trying to mobilize and get people together in the same room, because that's where all the ideas come.
As always, you can read more about all of the stories and issues that we discuss on this podcast at timesunion.com. After the break, get ready to hear about adorable baby goats. We'll talk to the Fabulous Beekman Boys about what they've been up to since the pandemic began.
Hi, I'm Casey Seiler, editor of the Times-Union. Join us for an ongoing discussion on major developments in the saga of Keith Raniere, co-founder of NXIVM, the shadowy upstate New York organization at the center of the explosive federal investigation that resulted in Raniere's conviction on charges of extortion, sex trafficking, and more. We talk to former members of NXIVM, discuss the latest news, and preview the likely next twists in this bizarre and disturbing story. You can find NXIVM on Trial at timesunion.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Eagle, a Times Union podcast. I'm Jessica Marshall. It's been about 13 years since the Fabulous Beekman Boys, Dr. Brent Ridge and Josh Kilmer-Purcell, moved to a historic farm in the Mohawk Valley. In that time, they've had an eponymous TV show. They've won CBS's Amazing Race. They opened the Beekman 1802 Mercantile in Sharon Springs, and they started a number of their own beauty product lines. Blogger Kristi Gustafson Barlette featured the pair a few years ago in her 20 Things You Don't Know About Me series on timesunion.com. She caught up with them again recently to learn what they've been up to since on an episode of 20 Things Plus. Here's a snippet of their conversation.
So I know you started the company in 2008, and a lot has changed since then. A lot has grown and developed. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, so many people in the capital region know us for our shop in Sharon Springs, New York. The Beekman Mercantile has had a long history in Sharon Springs. William Beekman had his original mercantile there way back 215 years ago. His son had a Beekman Mercantile there. And then we launched the Beekman Mercantile there when we moved to Sharon Springs. And it just continues to grow. And, it was so exciting this past year, right before everything went crazy with COVID. We actually did a partnership with the TV show Schitt's Creek and completely rebranded the Mercantile for a short period of time as the Rose Apothecary from that show.
People who watch Schitt's Creek know that the main store there is Rose Apothecary, and we rebranded, put the signage outside. We took our signage down, put Rose Apothecary up outside, brought products that would have been on Schitt's Creek, and it was huge. Just tens of thousands of people came to visit Sharon Springs and be part of the show.
That is fun. That you've done so much for Sharon Springs with the business, and then you think, oh, you did even more, and even at this time when obviously the economy was changing and everything else. So that's very cool. Speaking of Schitt's Creek and TV, you were known for the Fabulous Beekman Boys, and then you won CBS's Amazing Race. And while those shows are obviously in your past, you're still doing TV. So what's going on with that?
Yeah, it's so funny because, each of those things had their own audience. Of course, our little TV show on Planet Green and then the Amazing Race, but nothing has been bigger TV-wise than being on QVC and HSN because both of those channels are in about 100 million homes. And when we're on those channels, we do about 8 hours of live TV a day when we're on those channels. I know. And it's so wonderful because not only do we get to tell our story to all those people, but we get to tell the story of Sharon Springs and upstate New York. And so many people who watch us on QVC or HSN then come to visit Sharon Springs.
And what's been wonderful about this time of COVID, because there are some good things that have happened, we've been able to broadcast directly from Sharon Springs. So we've been broadcasting into 100 million homes directly from our mercantile in Sharon Springs.
And the nice thing is too, I mean, home shopping networks and that kind of style of shopping has been popular for a long time, but I feel like now that so many people are home, it's even more popular. You're
right.
You want to see. And it's nice that you two are there both promoting your own products, because people would feel like it's a little bit of a show too, in the sense that they're getting to know you. It's not a host presenting your products, you are presenting your products.
That's absolutely right. We get to tell the story. We get to bring the baby goats and hold the baby goats. And we always try to think of every hour that we're on QVC or HSN as we're putting on an entertaining show for the people who are watching. Even if people don't decide to buy that particular time, we still want them to have left the episode feeling better about themselves, feeling happier, and feeling the kindness that we always try to promote.
And we'll get to one of the things you're doing with kindness in a minute, but I think when you bring baby goats to a show, who doesn't want to tune in, because they're just adorable. So
I know, and you never know what they're going to do. Like it's, they eat something. The last show we were doing, they ate my microphone twice. While we were in the middle of the show, like all the sound went down.
Yeah.
Well, that's adorable, and I love seeing them on your website. You have that live webcam, don't you? So people can watch the
That's
goats.
right.
We do. We have live baby goat camps. It's 24/7. You can check out what the baby goats are doing.
I think one of the quotes I had read from, was it you, Dr. Brent, about something, if life gives you lemons, you turn it into lemonade, but if life gives you goats, you can change the world, right? And
that's right.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's
I know
right.
you've been working to change the world. All these things you've said are examples of that, but you've really worked to spread kindness over the last year. And I think kindness is obviously always important, but we've especially seen it in the last year when it's been so tumultuous, where there's a lot of kind people, but there's also a lot of very angry people. So
Yes.
You've kind of worked to focus on the kindness. And what have you done with that?
I think what makes the Beekman neighborhood so powerful is that we're all focused on kindness and being kind to one another, being kind to our community, being kind to the environment, being kind to our skin.
So we really wanted to focus our energies last year on kindness. As you say, it was a tough year for everybody. There was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of fear. There's a lot of things going on. And so we wanted to get kindness out in the world in the biggest way we could. So we did several things.
Yeah, and like as Josh was saying, when we launched in Ulta, we normally would have gone to visit a lot of the stores, but because of COVID, we couldn't do that. And so then we thought, okay, well, how can we communicate this idea of kindness to all of the Ulta team members?
So if we're shipping goat milk to all the stores, what goes best with milk?
Cookies.
But we didn't just send a big batch of cookies we bought from somewhere, anywhere, and sent them all over.
So what our team did was they found a local mom and pop bakery near the location of every Ulta store that we were going in. It was a massive undertaking to identify 400 small bakeries
around the country.
And then we hired those bakeries to make and deliver the cookies to their local Ulta store. So not only did we help support that small mom and pop bakery, but then that bakery got to introduce themselves to all the Ulta employees when they delivered the cookies. And so it really did help us reinforce that idea of working hard, never quit, help your neighbor, but also support your own community and support kindness at the same time.
One of the things we noticed in the last year is, I think some of us kind of took, maybe it's people who work in stores or cashiers or staffers for granted. You just thought, well, I go in there and they make it so I can make my purchase. And I think one thing we learned to realize is that's a version of a frontline worker, because they were going out there every single day, wearing their mask for 8 or more hours a day, helping people at a time when they were scared and uncertain. So to kind of show that appreciation, I think that's something they're so deserving of it too.
Oh,
absolutely.
Absolutely. And think about, pre-vaccine, that was really scary to be there every day trying to help people get their groceries, get whatever supplies that they needed, and not knowing enough about the virus to know how it was going to impact your life personally and your health. that was a really scary thing for retail workers.
And it was just also the best way to show the Ulta employees what Beekman was about. They actually saw kindness in person. They got to taste it, with the cookies.
And then it also helped us understand a brand new kind of hallmark of Beekman 1802. We kind of became famous for all the Ulta employees about sending these cookies to them. And so now every time that we have a new product launch in Ulta, we're going to deliver cookies with every product launch. And so we just had another big launch of our Bloom Boosters last week. And we worked with Corso's Cookies based out of Syracuse, New York. And they did these amazing iced sugar cookies that had little goats on them. And they did the drawings of our product. And they actually got to bake the cookies for every single Ulta store.
And I think you've set a precedence now. So every Ulta employee is going to be thinking, I need to sign up for the shift during the launch because I need those cookies.
That's right.
Exactly.
Right.
Very cool. Okay. Like all of us, you've spent a lot of time at home the last year. And as if you two haven't already been productive ever since you've owned Beekman 1802, you've been even more productive the last year, right? With some renovations and things like that. What have you been doing around your home?
Well, that's right.
Yeah, we were super fortunate that during the pandemic, we had just started renovations on our 200 and plus year old house, and very fortunate. The contractor that we brought on, he worked with his wife, so they were able to continue working throughout the pandemic and safely with each other. And we remodeled our kitchen and our bathrooms, and it was just a great project to have for the year because, as you know, we were all home a lot.
Yeah, and the other thing we did is we really started planning out the gardens more on the farm because we knew, or we didn't know, but we presumed that we'd still be doing social distancing. We still wouldn't be able to do huge events, like the Rose Apothecary or even our Harvest Festival, which we typically do. So we started thinking about ways that we could do smaller, more intimate events on the farm throughout the season. And so we partnered with the plant company Proven Winners to start planning out the gardens on the farm. So now we can do these small tours of the farm throughout the growing season where people can come and look at the beautiful flowers on the farm. They can go into the vegetable garden. They can play with the goats all throughout the season. And we planned, I think, about 10 or 15 different experiences that have already started now with the baby goat tours and will go all the way through the fall.
Well, I think I remember from your original 20 Things, which I believe was in 2018, weren't you getting about 85% of your own food for your own house from the garden, right?
We do. We still grow all our own food and trade with our neighbors for everything we don't have. I cannot wait to go out and support a local restaurant.
We're excited. We're excited. As soon as we get the vaccine, we're going out to eat.
And I was going to say, and now that restaurants are going up to 75% too, I think that will be great for restaurants. So are you able to tell me what the first restaurant is you'll go to?
Ooh, it might be something in Sharon Springs. So either the American Hotel or 204 Bistro, Brimstone Bakery, Black Cat. We have 4 restaurants.
Or by the office here.
Or what's that?
Or by the office.
Yeah,
right by the office here. Yeah. We've got
Michael's, Druthers, Shaker and Vine. I mean, so many choices.
You can hear the rest of this episode of 20 Things Plus on Times Union's YouTube channel at youtube.com/AlbanyTU. That's it for this week. I'm Jessica Marshall. We'll be back next week with another look inside the newsroom here at the Times Union. In the meantime, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram, or head over to timesunion.com for the latest news and features. The Eagle is a production of the Albany Times Union. It's produced and edited by me, Jessica Marshall, with help from the Times Union digital team and the newsroom.